streamed version of this committee, so no doubt there are throngs of people at home now desperate to find out the latest amendments to our constitution moving forward, or at the very least there should be. It doesn't actually apply to us because of our designation, but to make you aware, the Council is the data controller under the Data Protection Act of this video stream. Data collected during the webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published retention policy. You're reminded to take notice of what is displayed on the screens in case there's anything potentially embarrassing for you or for the local authority, and to please mind your language, given that the public will be watching this online, even if they're not currently present in the room. To request to speak, as usual, please raise your hand clearly and I will call you in whatever order I notice you. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight. In the event of a fire, please exit the building in a calm and non-panic filled manner using the main staircase, and head to Exchange Road where we'll meet up and check, see who the survivors are. In the meantime, can I request that all mobile phones are put on silent or put away? And I've got apologies from Councillor Bounds. Do we have apologies from anyone else? No, I have apologies for lateness from Councillor Rana, which will follow in due course, in which case, if we could turn to the first substantive item, which are the minutes. Okay, which are disclosures. Does anyone have anything they wish to disclose about their conflicts of interest relating to the entirely basic agenda we've got in front of us? No. In which case, turning to the minutes, could I ask if members have anything which they wish to raise from the minutes? It's around there. Do members have anything which they wish to raise as matters of accuracy from the minutes? No. Or can I take it those are agreed? The next item is public question time, which unfortunately we do not have the opportunity to do as there are no public present. I wonder if at some future time we're going to have live questions coming in on the system to ask us questions online. One step at a time, you know, a revolution by increments, a very Fabian strategy, Michael, if I say so myself. Item 5, review the Constitution. We're going to take each of these in parts, looking at each of the different elements of this, because there's quite a lot to it. So I'll be calling in officers to present each item as we go through it, starting with the procedures for the guillotine. And could I hand over to Chris Pedlow to introduce the proposed change?
Thank you, Chair. So this aspect of the Constitution is before the committee, following officers realising that there appears to be an inconsistency over the use and need for the guillotine for standard committees. Historically, there's been no guillotine for standard committees, only for full council. The guillotine was introduced for all meetings when the council left the Old Town Hall and had to hold its meeting in an external venue, which had a hard closing time. When the council moved back to the new Town Hall, the Constitution was amended to revert back to the previous approach for full council, but the guillotine relating to standard committees was not changed. There's more detail set out in section 5 of the report. So the committee is asked to consider the options in section 5.9 A and B, and decide what options we put forward to full council for their consideration. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
I see Councillor Pritchard.
Just a very quick response to me. Regarding the recommendations in 5.9, I think under A, option 2 is the best. It gives the ability for a conclusion of the process after 2.5 hours and a voluntary extension of it. And I agree with item B just remaining as it is, so both the committees and full council have similar procedure rules.
Would any other member like to speak on this particular item? No? In which case, can I take it that that section of the Constitution proposals is agreed?
Someone needs to say Councillor Pritchard has moved.
Okay, Councillor Pritchard has moved. Which one is it? Is it I? No, it's I.I2. Okay, I2.
Which page is this, please? Section 5.9.
Is there a seconder for that? No one wanting to second that? Can I say that's agreed? by acclamation?
It's moving quite quickly, Chair.
Councillor Crowe.
Apology for my slight lateness. I had to wait 35 minutes for a metro bus at peak time from Freebridge Station, which is pretty unacceptable. I just want to be clear on what is actually being proposed here. Is it that, so it's 59.2, that committees would be voting on a guillotine after 2.5 hours, exactly the same way as we do for full council, but not for planning committee, is that right?
Every committee.
Oh, including the planning committee, because I saw in the report there was, and sorry, because we're paperless, so it makes it much harder to scrutinise things. I do recall reading that there was some difference for planning, or is that the existing rule?
No, that's the existing rules. The purpose of this is to sort of to make it clear what the actual rules are going forward. So the proposal made by Councillor Pritchard is that, for same as the current full council, is that for every committee at 2.5 hours, at that point there's a guillotine vote, and then every 30 minutes after that. That's that's how the current full council procedure rules, and that that continues for full council. That's what has been moved.
Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, while I'm happy with it in principle generally, it's just the planning committee aspect. I mean, there could be some circumstances, presumably, where there's an absolute requirement to dispose of business. Is there any possibility there?
Yeah, you can. In section 5.8b, it makes the point, or 5.8c, it says that so there are some that can't be deferred. So if a guillotine falls, this would have to continue, but you may want to, because there's no option for going forward, so you may want to put that as part of the option to full council, that there is some flexibility within planning. We need to be, I think that's the point, it's inconsistency in the constitution, which is what we're trying to iron out. So there may be an aspect that needs to be addressed, like the current aspect that any statutory items need to be moved, or a second date be selected if the guillotine is used at the planning committee.
Councillor Pritchard.
Yeah, this came up very recently at planning committee under the current rule, which is the 11 o'clock guillotine. And towards the end of the meeting, we had to rearrange items on the agenda to squeeze it in to prevent a further meeting. So it wouldn't make it any worse than it currently is. But if a further meeting would be necessary, it would be an impetus for the councillors present to vote to extend the meeting to complete that business to prevent a further meeting. So I think this would be a better solution to that problem than is currently the case.
I mean, I would add that for backbench councillors and for the opposition, this is an improvement on the current arrangements, which effectively leave an awful lot in the hands of those setting the agendas. Whereas in this situation, there's the possibility of further debate if that's what members want. Well, we have that moved and seconded. Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm all in favour of making the rules consistent, so they're consistent for full council and the meetings. I think the fact that they're inconsistent now is just an oversight. Really, it feels more like a clerical exercise. This, and I don't think we're already making a bit harder weather of it than I thought we were going to. Really, but yeah, I suppose we've got committees where business has to be decided. Then there has to be some sort of get out of like voting to end the meeting when there's business to be concluded.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that's my concern as well, that if there are planning applications, that I wouldn't want to see them deferred because there's just been too much talk and too much time taken up at a meeting, and deferred to the next meeting. So that is my concern about it being in members' hands to effectively delay planning applications being heard.
I mean, as things currently stand, when we hit 11 o'clock, the meeting's over. So it enables that option. I mean, unless we're going to have no guillotine process at all for committees, Is that the counter proposal? Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I accept your point that I think you've just made again, that the proposal is better than current arrangements, but nonetheless, my earlier observation, which I think Councillor Crowe has just reiterated, is that it is in theory possible for members to place us in a difficult position in terms of delaying planning applications by bringing about a guillotine position. For that.
Filibustering to that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a proposal that has been moved and seconded. If there's another proposal that members would like to put forward, I think it's a case of speak now or forever hold your peace, and then we can put both to the vote. I'm not seeing any hands. No. In that case, can we put that to the vote? All those in favour of option II, which will enable committees to vote to continue after the meeting has reached 2.5 hours, in keeping with full council procedure rules? All those against? Any abstentions? The decision is passed. Moving on to the next item of business, the next part of the Constitution, licensing subcommittee procedures. Can I hand over to our Head of Legal and Democratic Services, Suraj Chaudhry, to briefly introduce the proposed change?
Thank you, Chair. So the detail in this report, members will see that the intention of this is to improve and update the licensing procedure rules for hearings. The intention is to ensure that such hearings are fair, transparent, and provide the subcommittee, which is sitting, sufficient evidence that they can make robust and balanced decisions. So it's really a refresh of the policy of the procedure. It provides updates in terms of the order of speaking, presentations, and questions. Provides a bit of clarity around who can do what in terms of the different parties who attend these types of hearings, and just tightens up on the hearing behaviours, so standards of conduct and things that should be taking place procedurally at hearings like this. So members will see that there's additional wording around cross-examination, which is something that should be kind of avoided as far as possible. It can be allowed with the permission of the chair, but generally, in the spirit of the legislation, these types of hearings are supposed to be discussion between the parties rather than very combative, argumentative type of affairs. So we've put in a bit of wording around cross-examination, and also something around bringing in irrelevant information, which can tend to happen. So it's just ensuring that there's a bit, the chair has a bit stricter controls in terms of, and is actually able to refer to the procedure rules to kind of back up the management of the hearing. So there's general kind of wording in addition to kind of confirm the position around, so a specific point is around the withdrawal of applications to review licences. The legislation says that such hearings can't be cancelled, even if all the parties kind of agree to that. But the previous procedure was silent on that, so it now confirms the position on that. And we had a recent occurrence of this situation, so it's caused us to have a look at this. And generally, various updates in there to reflect minor changes in the legislation. So there are a few amendments across the document, and specifically at 3.3b, which is your page 36. There is some wording actually which we missed around conversion of existing licences. There's also reference to approvals from justices, which is something legacy wording from pre-2003 Act. So it's not reflected in your 3.3b, but what we propose to do is just take out the minor wording in there, which is out of date. But apart from that, all the changes are set out in the document that you have.
And I think there's an addition to the recommendation, which is, and that the head of governance, people and performance be delegated to make additional amendments to ensure the rules reflect current legislation, and that these be included in the appendix of these minutes to go to the full council in recognition, I think, of some legislation that has not currently been picked up. Would anyone like to speak on this? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Suraj, I'm a little bit confused at this statement you made about cancelling the meeting. If all parties wish to cancel the meeting, there's something in the legislation that says it still has to go ahead, and I'm not quite sure what the meeting would achieve if everyone's pre-decided that they feel the right course of action is to cancel it. Just explain, please. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, the legislation, having had a recent occurrence of this and having looked into it, it doesn't provide for that flexibility to cancel it, and that's the point I'm making, that it isn't that practical. And actually, when the parties rightly would kind of ask, well, as you've just asked, why can't we just cancel this if everyone's in agreement? But that isn't the case under the legislation. So that's why we're stating that quite clearly in the procedure note, so that parties know that. I don't think it's particularly practical. I don't know if there's anything to add from the reason. No, there's nothing we can do about it. So it's better, at least we're telling the parties that that is the case. So I mean, even if they put in an application for a review, at least they'll have in mind that it will go the distance, at least to a physical hearing. Even if they think, well, I'll put it in and might withdraw it later on, at least they know that there are consequences. You will have to have a physical hearing, even if it's just everyone agreeing not to be there. And we had an example of that in the last month.
Are there any other questions or comments? No? Can I then take it that recommendation with the added text that I read out is agreed? Well, do I need someone to propose it, do I? Or?
You've proposed this.
Just need a second.
Do I need, can I get a seconder on that? Councillor Pritchard, thank you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Moving on to the next section, full council annual meeting order of business, discussion and vote, for which I'll hand over to Chris Pedlow to introduce and propose the change. Councillor Jones.
Wrong one. Oh, yeah. No. Sorry, Chair. I've for full transparency, I think it's only fair that I should declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in this item on the basis that it affects potentially affects my office.
Thank you for that. The recommendation is that the full council be recommend. Well, I think Chris is going to go through it. So,
thank you. It's 32. It's section 7. The proposal in section 7 is a minor change with regards to adding a potential item to the annual meeting of the full council, so order of business, in respect of the ability for members to consider at this meeting a no confidence, a notice of motion regarding the leader of the council, if it's moved and seconded. Section 7 provides a background to the amendment, and as Councillor Jones just said, he has been consulted on it. In essence, it's all other full council meetings, there is the ability for members to move a no confidence motion, but there isn't at the annual meeting except when the leader's 4-year term. So it's just putting a bit, an aspect in there to deal with that, because the most logical time to do it would be at the AGM, at an or annual meeting. So it's just a minor tweak. We've already had one a couple of years ago, but it's technically, we had to find a procedural matter to allow it to occur. Thank you.
Councillor London.
Just to understand, does that mean technically Peter's been the leader for the last 2 years?
No one's paid me for it, so
I'm happy to move that proposal. I understand I'm not actually moving a no confidence, am I? No.
are there, Councillor Cray?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I speak as someone who's moved at least one against yourself, Chairman, as a former leader, and also against the mayor as well. I haven't yet moved one against the current leader, but my view would be that I'd want to do so at a time of my choosing rather than having it prescribed for the annual council meeting as to when to do it. I'm a little bit puzzled. Like I said, Mr. Pedlow did mention that it was done a couple of years ago, and it clearly was able to be done. But it just strikes me as a little bit odd having it as a standing item in the annual the order of business for the annual council meeting. I'm not sure what other local authorities actually do that. I know there's not that many that elect by third, but is it? Can I just ask? Is it a procedure we have elsewhere?
It's because the rules around the full council agenda are such that you can only undertake the business that's set out in the constitution.
We had to.
Okay, well, go on.
So when we dealt with it a number of years ago, we had to we had to do a urgency to be able to do it. So at the moment, this is given the ability, should it be required, to be on the agenda. It's not going to be a standing item. It's only if required. So it's not going to be. It won't be in every annual meeting. Is if there is a notice motion put in, it can be received and dealt with at the annual meeting, which currently can't be. The only way we had to do it is through an urgency procedure, which was quite messy constitutionally, and it's just a clearer and more transparent way, as Councillor Lamb says, it's quite clear the annual meeting exactly what has to be dealt with and what doesn't.
Councillor Cray.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. My misunderstanding was that it would almost be like a standing item, and we'd have to speak to say as to why we're not moving it, which would look a little bit odd. But of course, as I understand it, such a motion can be moved at any full council meeting, and apart from the annual council. But if we agree with that, then it's the provision to be able to move it, and there's also the provision as well. I'm looking at all the options that if members wrote to the mayor, as I understand it, if enough members wrote to the mayor to request an extraordinary full council meeting, a motion could therefore be moved as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely, what you've just said is correct. Yeah, but
that's great.
It's,
it's good to know there's many options. Thank you.
I think Councillor Landers already moved it, haven't you? Yes, that's right. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Jones, can I take that as agreed? Agreed. Brilliant. And I think that concludes the constitutional section of our agenda, which moves on to item 6, review of provisions relating to call-in and urgency. Members will be well aware that these are rarely used measures in terms of how urgency is often used, and part of that was described a minute ago for urgency being quite messy. Can we just take it those reports are taken as read, since they're generic, we do them every single year? Would any members like to speak on them? Councillor Allen.
I'd just comment, if you look at all the dates of them, they happen immediately before the election, and could I suggest that maybe that's a element of poor planning somewhere, that we've ended up in a situation where we've had to use protection from call-in immediately before an election, and it doesn't look good that we're doing so many things immediately before the election that we're protecting from call-in. And I say that as some, we're in the party in control. I don't think it looks good that we're doing that.
I mean, historically at least, it was used very rarely. I would say if you look at the items which has been raised for, that all of them are procurement processes where unfortunately we don't always have complete control over what timeline it's going to take to get these things in place. Some of them are really quite significant for the continuing functioning of the organisation, and while I suspect we could just note that the committee feels that to be the case. I'll bring you in just a second. That ultimately delaying some of these decisions would have a disproportionate negative consequence for the organisation. That's the only basis on which urgency can really be used anyway. Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the reasoning for each of the 3 items being protected is sound enough, but and the number of them, 3, doesn't sound very many, but historically it is quite a large number. I mean, we've gone for many council years with the 0 figure of call-in protection and occasionally 1, but 3, it looks like a crowd, that's all. It's more than we expected.
It is. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I do seem to recall that there was some discussion at previous full councils about some of the protection from call-ins that did actually occur. Now, I think to a certain extent we probably need the chief executive, or indeed the previous one, in to give the a very technical explanation for why these were required. But I mean, in particular, the one to do with the contract relating to sport and leisure for K2. There were extremely good reasons at the time why all these were invoked, and I can certainly assure the committee that none of them are done lightly, and there were important pressing reasons for them that would have prejudiced the interests of the council if we hadn't actually done them. But clearly, the intention is that we don't want to try and bypass the call-in process under any circumstances. We're committed to scrutiny. We're committed to a transparent decision-making process. Unfortunately, there were reasons that had to happen. If members do want to discuss that further with myself and the officers, I'm sure we can arrange that.
I mean, this item of business does enable members, if they have any issues, to raise them and potentially to, I guess, propose alternatives to the process around this if they feel it's been abused. These were, of course, almost a year ago now. I guess maybe we could just flag it up for the chief executive, the current chief executive, that the committee would be disappointed to see it happening again this April. Bear in mind it's only a month away. But if members have no actual proposals they want to make in terms of changing the process, can we just take that as noted? And
Chair, I mean, I look for guidance from the officers on this, who, looking across, would probably have a fair idea if there was a likelihood of any decisions that would require protection call-in coming up. But I'm aware of none, if that's any reassurance to the committee.
So the Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. I mean, well, I looked at these at home and thought I couldn't, like the K2, I just felt that it's not something that would sneak up on us. I thought that it wouldn't be something that we'd need to call in, because we'd know a long time beforehand that this contract was coming up. Even like the refuge truck renewal, we've known that they needed to be renewed for a long time, and it just then suddenly gets this air of urgency which pushes it through. So I'm probably just going to echo what Bob said, that it might not seem like a lot, but 3 is more than we used to, and we should make every effort to discuss these things rather than getting them through in this manner. Thank you.
So the recommendation we have set out on the agenda is that no change to the provisions relating to call-in and urgency be made. Would anyone like to amend that then with changes to the process? No? Then I'd like to move the recommendation. Is there any second for that? Councillor Pritchard, is that agreed? Agreed. Fantastic. There is no supplemental item agenda on the agenda of business. So that concludes our meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for the 10th of June 2024 after the election. So thank you all very much. Meeting closed.